and welcome. Tonight I'm talking about children and their behaviour and alrighty. So I'm going to carry on from where I was. So hello, Liz. I'm going to carry on from where I was. So children these days, 9 out of 10 children are sixes, and they're often being born to parents who are fives. Sometimes 5.5, sometimes 5.25. Okay, so remember that the majority of children these days are sixes. All right, and I'm going to talk to you about the kind of behaviour that they show if they're a 6, as opposed to a child who has an entity attached to them. Is a just a 5 really. So and I'm going to talk about that behaviour as well, and what to do in both instances, and how to recognise the difference, so you can save yourself a whole lot of heartache. And I will share some personal readings with you. I'll share 4 different readings of how entities work. And I don't even like the name entities, but I'm going to explain to you why they're called entities in a minute. All right, so okay, let's get started. So children who are 6s, okay, what sort of signs, like you know how people look at, they go to the shops and they look in the pram, they go, oh, there's an old soul, like dear old Archie, oh, already, oh, he's an old soul, how funny. But anyway, so 6s are all about love. They, like if you think about it, like here's the world, here's us. And here's a realm that's kind of in between, and this is where the entities live, and here is where the angels are, and here is where heaven are, and here's where the spiritual classroom is, and there's all these different layers. We share this current world with lots of people who have been, some people have lived 2 lifetimes, some people have lived 100 incarnations. There's more to this life than you guys realise, or maybe you're starting to realise with some of these lessons. So anyway, these children, so at this level here, the universe and her omniscience is going, the world needs to be put back into a better shape. The world's in really crap shape. So we're going to use these kids. Best kind of network marketing there is use kids. We can put kids into families to help make the world a better place. The kids come from love. Souls are simple. We just want to love and be loved. That's what kids do. That's why they come in our lives. Just because they're born as 6s doesn't mean they understand being a 6. And if a parent is a 5, and if you're watching this, you're obviously a 5.25 or 5.5, which means you've already started on your spiritual journey. These kinds of conversations will make sense to you. You believe that there's more to life. 5s don't even entertain that there is such a thing as an entity. What they do is they look at those children and they get diagnosed as ADD, ADHD, OCD, and ODD, which has increased by 700% in 8 years. All right, I've done my research. I've spoken with Michael Carr, Greg, and everything like that. These kids need help. They need help in the classroom. They need help at home. They need help in the playground, and that's what I want to do with you guys tonight. Now, I talk a lot, but I do hope that my point comes across. So, children who are 6s, okay, our special children. Doreen Virtue calls them our indigo children, our rainbow children, okay? So anyway, those kinds of children, they're all about love, okay? However, they do display signs of being very strong-willed, of knowing their own mind at a very, very young age. This is all good. These are good points. If your child is a 6, it's fantastic, and I can still help you parent them. Okay, so bear with me. They are free thinkers. They're passionate truth seekers. They're highly intuitive, they're empathic, they're compassionate, they're fun, they love to smile, they were born with a smile on their face, and they'll carry it through their lives because that's their job, is just to cheer people up, and they know that. They're a good judge of character, they're a good judge of circumstances. They can be loners as well, and they're quite happy being on their alone. And a lot of parents worry about their kids being on their own and not playing with other kids, but I wouldn't be. It means that those kids are actually picking up that. So if your child is a 6 and they happen to be in a classroom that have got 5s, where the kids are 5s, or there's a group of 5s and they haven't found their group of 6 yet, they haven't found their tribe of 6s, those kids aren't going to go and play with 5s. They know that, so don't worry if your child is a loner. They love colour, they love creating, they love making noise, they love singing, they love dancing. You know, how many can relate to what I'm saying? They don't like structured sport. Hi, Sammy. So I'm not doing readings tonight, Sammy, but if you want to PM me, then I can give you the details on how to go about getting a reading. So they love nature, they love animals. They connect with animals on an intuitive, telepathic level. Watch them. Kids will respond to telepathy from you. If you're struggling to discipline your child, use telepathy. It'll work. They don't like rules. They don't like unfairness. They do like fairness. They're very, very, very sensitive to chemicals and have high allergies as well. They'll see things that you can't see. They'll have invisible friends that are real, trust me. They feel driven. As they get older, these kids, or even young kids, they feel driven to make the world a better place. Like, look at all the kids now getting paper straws, plastic straws. Hi, Karen. Getting plastic straws out of circulation. There's so many kids doing so many things now. They're very, very sensitive to their environment. You know, does this sound like your child? If so, stay tuned, because I've got more information on how to parent those kids. And I'm going to talk to you about them, because they're not like when I was growing up. Remember, I was one in 500,000 kids that were born with a gift like mine, with all 6 senses intact. I have got so much company now, even though they're shorter than me, you know, and I kids are just amazing. Anyway, so, and then you've got the kids that have got entities attached to them. Now, the behaviour that they display is very different to the children who, what I call sixes. Children who have got entities attached to them, they could be a 6, but they could also be a 5.5 or a 5. So hang on a second, I need a drink. So children who display behaviour like smashing walls, putting fists through doors, throwing things, smashing things, hitting, growling, making animal sounds, throwing themselves on the floor. They've got scary behaviour. They can be destructive. They have nightmares. They refuse to go to bed. They can take hours to go to bed. 2 separate groups of kids. Now, if you've only just tuned in and you're starting to wonder what I'm talking about, you may need to watch this replay again, because it's actually really important information for parents and teachers about our children and their behaviour. Something I'm really passionate about, and the children, I'm writing about children as our spiritual teachers in my next book. So anyway, and I'll put a link to a video up after this session, so you can watch another session just about children on my YouTube channel. I think the best way for me to give you this information is to tell you 2 sets of stories. Okay, I'm going to tell you some true readings about some of the work I've done with kids, so you can see the difference. Okay, so let's start with the lovely kids who are 6s, or the ones that we all think are pure soul, or they're an old soul. You know, they're wonderful. They can communicate telepathically. They know stuff. They have invisible friends. They may just, you know, they'll say amazing things. They'll even say, I've had kids say to me, or I've had parents say to me, my child told me that I'm not his mum. He remembers his mum from his last lifetime. And there's so much. Let's start with... Let's start with a little girl called, I'm going to change her name today. Let's call her little Molly. Let's call her Molly. It's a true story, but Molly's mum came to me for a reading, and she actually wrote the foreword in my book. And she came to me for a reading about something totally irrelevant. And while she was there, she never spoke about Molly, but I did say to her, do you have a daughter about this high, you know, with long dark hair? And she goes, yeah, that's my daughter Molly, she's 5. And I said, she will surprise you with the things that she says and the things that she knows. And she goes, oh, right, okay, well, so I explained a little bit to Mum about Molly, but Mum wasn't interested in that. Mum was more interested in what she'd come for. So that's fine. About 7 or 8 months later, Molly's mum, her name's, I'm going to change her name too. Let's call Molly. Let's call her Mum Sally. So Molly and Sally have got a mum called Holly. Marion, you're hopeless. So Grandma Holly, Mum Molly, so Sally, Molly. Forget it. Okay, so anyway, Grandma lost her bracelet. She came up, you might have heard this story before, but bear with me, there's a reason. Grandma lost her bracelet. She came back over here to her daughter's house to say, where's my gold bracelet? I can't find it anywhere. She was beside herself. They looked everywhere, couldn't find it. Went back to Grandma's, couldn't find it. Gave up. That afternoon, when little Molly came home from school, finished her homework, Mum was sitting with her and she remembered what I'd said. And she goes, hey, you don't happen to know where Grandma's bracelet is, do you? And she goes, yeah. It's in Grandma's shed. In the corner, there's a bag, a white bag, and it's in the bottom of the bag. And Mum says to her, how do you know? That shed's locked. You kids aren't allowed to go in that shed. And little Molly says, Mum, you asked me a question. I gave you the answer. And she walked away. For these kids who are pure sixes, they just know stuff. They do. Anyway, so they went across to Deb's house and... said it now. Over to Grandma's house, and they looked around the house. No, Mum, it's not in the house. Went out to it's in the shed, Mum. Went out to the shed. Grandma unlocked the shed. Kids aren't allowed in the shed. There was a white bag in the corner. They spilled it all out. Grandma had been putting things ready together to go to the Good Sammy's. Anyway, there was the bracelet. How did little Molly know? She was 5 years old, but she knew that bracelet was there. If your kids are saying stuff to you just because you're the parent, doesn't mean you've got the answers. These kids, you know, they know stuff. If your kid's throwing a tantrum before school or after school or whatever, or on a weekend, it may just be that they can sense that there's a car accident down the road, or you're going to get held up down there, or by delaying you by 10 minutes, you might just miss a serious accident that you hear about on the news that night, and you go, oh my God, I was down that road. If it was 10 minutes earlier, it would have been me. And you've totally forgotten that your child chucked a tantrum before you left. But that child knew. On some level, they knew. All right, so I'm going to tell a quick story about, and a lot of you may have heard this, but it's all relevant to tonight's lesson. Little Johnny's in grade 3. Little Johnny is a 6. Yeah, he's a 6. His mum is a 5. Johnny comes home from school, slams the door, throws his school bag on the floor. His mum's sitting at the table. She's on Facebook. She's got a glass of wine. She goes, oh my God, you've done it again. You've slammed the door. You've thrown the school bag on the floor. I'm getting sick of that behaviour. Go to your room. I don't want to see you. She's labelling it behaviour. Behaviour, right? I've had a phone call from school about your behaviour. Now I'm going to have to take you to a shrink, you know, to find out what's wrong with you. Get you some medication to calm you down. Okay, this is what's happening over in here. No homework gets done and no dinner gets cooked. Same little Johnny, still a 6, goes home. This time he slams the door and he throws his school bag on the floor over here, but his mum's a 6. She's sitting at the kitchen table. She's got a plate of fruit and some juice ready for him. And she goes, oh, come on, come sit down, talk to me. She doesn't ask him. She's tuned into him during the day. She knows, as a 6, we can tune in. We can tune into our kids. I remember once I tuned into my kids when they were in grade 2 and grade 3, and I knew that the daycare bus hadn't picked them up. And my 2 kids were still sitting at school in the office, and the daycare bus had been and gone. But anyway, that's another story. When you have that level of knowing, you can trust it. You can tune into your kids. Anyway, she tuned into her child, and she had a plate of fruit. Come and sit with me. And she doesn't say, they have a different language. And she doesn't say, how was your day? What did you do at school today? She doesn't say that. She says, who did you help today? Who were you with that was angry or sad? And little Johnny goes, oh, I helped Sarah today. She was crying. And Mum said, why did you help Sarah? Well, I gave her a hug because she was upset because her mum and dad split up. Is that okay? And Mum goes, yeah, that's really great that you did that. But yesterday you came home from school, you slammed the door and you threw your school bag on the floor yesterday as well. Who were you with yesterday that was angry? And little Johnny goes, oh, Mrs. Bennett, she was really grumpy. So I told her a joke to cheer her up. And Mum says, what do you get? That's the language they use. What do you get about Mrs. Bennett being angry? And he goes, she was mad at Mr. Bennett, but I tried to tell her a joke to cheer her up. That's really good. Okay, but I bet Sarah walked away with a smile on her face because you took away her sadness. And Johnny goes, yeah, she did actually. So Mum says, right, little Johnny, you're an empath. So as parents, we used to have to teach our kids the ABCs, the 1, 2, 3s, how to use a knife and fork, how to tie up their shoelaces. The hardest talk we've had to have with kids is the sex talk. These days, the hardest talk we have to have with kids is that you're an empath talk. And pretty much you can only have that conversation with a child if they're 5.5 and if you're 5.5 and above. All right, so your child is actually a 6. So they are in their soul, 60, 70, 80% of their time. They are coming from a place of spirituality or soul, and if you're a 5.5, you're in your soul 35, 45% of the time. Okay, so there's 2 different levels working here. And if you want to know more about that, just message me. I don't want to bore you tonight with my stories. But anyway, I think it's really important because a lot of parents come to me for psychic readings and they're really, really, really struggling with kids' behaviour and they don't understand it. And when they start to put some of these things into place, the behaviour changes. But anyway, I digress. So anyway, Johnny says, what's an empath, Mum? And Mum goes, when I make a mess on the kitchen bench and I get the sponge and I've got to clean the bench and then I wash it out under the sink, under the clean water, and my sponge is clean. Well, when you come home from school and you slam the door, if I was a different kind of mum, I would tell you off for slamming the door that way. Okay, but that slamming the door is a signal to me that you are full of people's emotions. You've been doing your job as a little angel that you are, and you've been cheering people up and helping people feel better about themselves and being happy again. You need to come home, talk to me just like this, and then you feel better. Those feelings aren't yours. Oh, that's good, because I really had a bad headache today, Mum. So what do I have to do, And well, Mum says, you just have to come talk to me because those feelings aren't all yours. Does that make sense? I hope it makes sense because these children need to learn how to work as an empath. Now, children as empaths do not need to take the next step of helping people. Yeah, sure, a hug's great. A joke is great, but as adults, there's a lot of people who are developing their empathic qualities these days and they're going, it's too hard, I've got it, I'm helping everybody. No, you don't have to help everybody at all. And you can only help people if you're guided by spirit to help people, if you're given the words to help people. You can't. Being an empath is just being aware of what other people are feeling. It is the first level of becoming psychic. It is the first level of starting to hear spirit. It's the first level of knowing that there is more to life. Spirit can't just bombard you and start you. You can't just start channeling and speaking in tongues, for lack of a better word, But you can't just channel. They can't just do that. They have to teach you. And they have to learn how to do it themselves to teach you. It's a huge concept, but also very simple. So anyway, Johnny goes, yeah, is that all I have to do, Mum? And she goes, yeah, just talk to me. So they had a hug. Johnny goes and does homework. Mum goes and cooks tea. Johnny never goes on Ritalin, never ends up smoking drugs at the age of 12 or 13. Mum does her homework. Happy house. Over here, this little Johnny has ended up on Ritalin because Mum got a phone call from school to say your child's behaviour is out of control and we need him diagnosed. We can't have him being this way in class. And so Mum is a 5. She takes him to a doctor who is a 5, takes him to a psychiatrist who is a 5, who then diagnoses little Johnny, who is a 6, as being out of control, has to label him because according to government statistics, he has to provide a report on every child that he sees and the outcome, what he's diagnosed and what medication he's put him on. All right, so that's how that system works. And little 6 Johnny is squashed. His spirituality is squashed out of him. And by the time he's 12, 13, he will be on dope. He'll be on drugs. 15, he'll be on other drugs. I don't even know what kind of drugs are around anymore. Right, so all I can say is those kinds of kids, same as me, I grew up, and we hear things, we know things, we can finish people's sentences for them, we can, years ago when the phone used to be attached to the wall, I'd be able to pick it up and go, hello Louise, I know who it was. These kids know stuff. By having drugs, it stops those images, right? And when these kids here start to take drugs, like I'm talking about the older ones, I'm not talking about the 5-year-olds, but I'm talking when they start to get into their teenage years, it lowers their energy. It lowers their energy. It puts holes in their auras. And that's when these entities come in, right? I don't like the word entities, and I'm about to tell you about that to clear that up because I don't like the word. So anyway, they become really vulnerable. These kids, and their whole energy is changed. This brings me to the story. Right, so there's two different ways of treating that. If so, the first one, which are the sixes, the kids that are sixes that have got all the, those lovely qualities that I was telling you about. The, even though they're intense, they there's ways of talking, working with those children. But if your child is displaying the smashing, throwing, hitting, animal sounds, growling, scary behaviour, contact someone like me. Doesn't have to be me. Contact a psychic. Get them cleared. You have to do a clearing on those kids because they've got entities with them. The show on A Current Affair, or any of those shows, and I feel really strongly, as you can tell, really passionate about this stuff. There are way too many kids being put on Ritalin or behaviour altering drugs when all they are is a six, and they're brought into the world to bring love into our world as fives. I don't know what it's like to be a five, but you know what I'm trying to say. So yeah, so anyway, let me work out where I'm at. Okay, the best way is to talk to you about my son. Okay, and it's in here, and in this book I've called him James, which is actually his middle name. When I first moved to Perth in 1995, this is a true story. And the reason I'm telling you about this is because the children that I see on shows like Current Affair, if there's 10 children that they're showing, one of those kids will have an entity attached to them, and no amount of psychologists, no amount of psychiatry, no amount of Ritalin will change it. Those kids will end up destroying families and living on the streets and becoming homeless, right? It's really, really destructive stuff. Yes, there's an element of ADD, ADHD. Absolutely there is. There's also an element of really shit diet, or children who refuse to eat, and behaviour, and normal terrible twos ending up being the terrible sevens. It continues. So anyway, when I moved to Perth in 1995, I went to a spiritual development group, a circle, and I didn't know anybody. I'd only been in Perth 3 months, and I went to the group. When I walked in the door, my Olpa said to me, "See that woman over there?" Now, my Olpa's in spirit. He's one of my team. "See that woman over there? You need to get her name and her phone number and put it in a safe place when you get home." And I went, "Where? I don't know her, but I know enough to trust my guides to tell me to do that." By the end of the night, I had this woman's phone number. I went home and I put it in a safe place, and I didn't need to use it for 18 months. 18 months later, we had gone through a horrific 8 months, 10 months with our 5-year-old son. He was an absolute shit of a kid, and he remembers all this, and which is even scarier. He remembers all this behaviour. This is not behaviour of a 6, even though he is a 6. He's actually a 6. But this behaviour is different. This is the behaviour I'm talking about where kids have got entities with them. Different. Destructive, smashing, throwing, yelling, screaming, tantrums, animal noises, growling. It's really, really horrible, scary to watch your child go through it. And there is a real difference. You'll know the difference. So anyway, one day and I was getting called to school, and I was having counselling at school every 3 days, and he was every day, and I was getting all the reports over from school about the destruction and the throwing of the desks and the throwing of the chairs into kids and whatever he was doing. He was 5 years old. He had the strength of an adult. So anyway, so over time I got reports and reports. "Oh, Mrs. Weatherburn, if it keeps going, we're going to have to expel Ryan, James from school." So, okay. Anyway, one day I got that phone call. "Mrs. Weatherburn, can you please come and pick up your son?" And I went, "Why? What has he done?" The principal said to me, "When you get here, you'll see what he's done." So anyway, I walked into the school, and like I said, it's in my story, and I'll put the link to the story. Anyway, I'll put a link up on Facebook after this session to help you. But anyway, so when I got into the principal's office, I felt like I was the naughty girl going into the principal's office. There was nothing left standing in his room. The TV had been thrown over, the bookcase had been thrown over, there was a big mahogany desk, and my son was cowering under that desk. He was 5 years old. So I just, and the principal, who was 6 foot tall and 6 foot wide, and it was a Catholic school, he said, "Mrs. Weatherburn, what's going on?" And I went, "It's all right, it's all right." And my my guide told me that it's all right, you know what to do when you get home. You need to get that phone number and you need to ring that woman from 18 months ago. So I grabbed my son's hand and I took him home. As soon as we got home, now as a 5-year-old, he'd never played with his 4-year-old sister. Playing to him was hurting her. So at all, it was a really, really destructive. I'm surprised I'm not in tears. But I'm so passionate about telling this story because I want you parents and you teachers to understand that there is more to life on a spiritual level with these kids. And I just want you to keep an open mind, and I can take questions afterwards or even after the session. So anyway, I went home and I rang this woman, and I said, "Hello, and is that Jacqueline?" She goes, "Yes." And I said, "My name's Marion." And the first thing she said to me was, "How do you know about my son?" And I said, "I don't know anything about your son, but I know about my son." And she went, "Okay, what's going on? What's his name? What's his age? What's happened?" I never told her anything about me being psychic at all. I wanted to learn. I wanted to see. I knew that my son had 3 entities with him. I knew. I told my mum, I told my husband, I told my girlfriend, she'd witnessed it all. And I knew he had 3 entities with him. But I did the right thing by the school. I know I backtrack a little bit, but I did the right thing by the school for at least 4 months. I went to every specialist. I went to every doctor, nutritionist, chiropractor, allergy specialist, everybody. Everybody said my son was normal. No ADD, no ADHD, no allergy, nothing. My son was normal. But I knew he had 3. I knew. So basically, according to the school, therefore, he had been expelled from school at the age of 5 for bad behaviour. But he was none of those labels. I knew he had 3 entities with him. So anyway, I told Jacqueline, a bit about his behaviour and that, but I never told her anything about me or the fact that I knew he had 3 entities with him. So anyway, which had been confirmed by my OPA, but I didn't know how to, that was all new to me. I didn't know how to deal with that stuff. The next night, Jacqueline rang me and she goes, "Marion," she sounded terrible. And I said, "Are you okay?" She goes, "Oh, look, no, I need to talk to you about your son." And I said, "Okay." She said, "Your son had 2 entities with him, and I've cleared them away now. I've, talked them through and I've helped them go to where they need to go. On their spiritual journey, and their guides came and took them." And see the thing about being psychic is it's not just me helping you, it's me helping them, and a lot of my work is done helping them, but that's a whole other conversation. In a way, it kind of applies to this conversation as well. And I said, "Well, what's an entity, Jacqueline?" I played dumb, because I didn't really know. I didn't know really. I knew they were. Anyway, she goes, "Marion, you know the types of kids that we call shitheads, that they rape grandmas in their home invasions, and they steal car, kick the mother out of the car, and they've got the baby in the car, and they steal the car and go down the road 200 kilometres an hour. You know that low life. We all know those low lives, right? That graffiti artists, they don't work. They just they're low lives. Eventually, those kinds of kids actually end up losing their lives through accidents. And they die before the term of their natural death. So if these kids are dying between the ages of 17 and 25 or 17 and 28 by drugs, cars, whatever, accidents, one-punch fights and all that sort of stuff, they die. But they die, sure, but they don't wake up holy, Jacqueline explained to me. Just because you're dead, you don't wake up holy. If you've died before the term of your natural death, the agreed contract time that we've contracted in the spiritual classroom, you end up, remember I was talking about these layers before? They end up in these layers here. So these kids who on earth, when they're alive, they got the police after them, they've got the parents, they've got teachers, all hounding them to behave. But when they end up in this layer here, there's nobody there to rule them, because they need to wait there until what is the term of their natural death. And then they can move forward into the light, so to speak. I'm not having that conversation now as to what that light actually is. It's not actually a light. But it kind of is, but isn't. It's an area. So those kids still, so now those kids have got this extra playground and they mess with our kids' heads, which included my kid's head, you know, and they destroy lives. This is how kids commit suicide, because the torment that these, and that's why they're called entities, but they're not entities. They're just shitheads that have died, that haven't woken up early. Now, excuse my language, but I'm passionate. You know, I nearly lost my son and my family because of this stuff. It's so real, right? Anyway, so I've been dealing recently with more kids. So anyway, I've got to finish the story. The following night, and I knew there were 3 entities attached to my son. The following night, Jacqueline rang back and she goes, Marion, there was one more. And I breathed a sigh of relief because I knew all along there was 3. I fought with my husband to say, I know that this is what's wrong with our child. But he didn't believe me. But I was the one that took him to all the specialists and the counsellors, and I was the one who did all the stress and the worry. It was horrible. Having a child like this is horrible. I don't know if any of you have got children like this, but I'm trying to give you this information to save you. You don't have to go through it the way I did. You don't have to go through it the way I did. This is my point. I'm not doing this for pity. I'm doing this for awareness. So anyway, she said, right, the 3 of them are gone. I said, what do I do now? She said, just stay home with your son. Now, right, he ended up having 4 months off school. I've still got all the school reports about all that time when he was, you know, naughty. Hang on. I've still got all those school reports. But anyway, he went back to, you know, he had all this time off school. And I quit my job to try and keep him home. We didn't go to the shopping centres. We didn't go anywhere. We stayed home just trying to get my son better and calm down. The very next night, my husband and I were standing at the sink. He was washing the dishes and I was drying the dishes. And our 2 kids were sitting here. Our 2 kids were sitting at a little one of those little children's tables, colouring in. They sat there for 4 hours. They never moved. They never fought. They were so happy. That 5-year-old and that 4-year-old had never spent happy time playing in their childhood because of these 3 entities attached to my son. But here they were sitting here for 4 hours colouring in. It was beautiful. And I said to my husband, look at that. Jacqueline's done something. He's different. He's different. He's a different child. You've got to admit it. And he said, yeah, I've got to admit it. He said, but it could be coincidence that, you know, he's just stopped being naughty. Okay, anyway, cut a long story short, we never, ever, ever saw that behaviour again, ever. Never. Once I saw my son try to chuck a tantrum, and he looked over his shoulder as if he was looking for backup. It went from black to white. It went from black to white. That behaviour, that shithead behaviour, to clean behaviour. He was perfect. He ended up slowly getting back integrated into school, and the teacher actually said to him, so he came back to school full time. And about 2 months later, we went to an open night at the school where we went to see the children's work in their classrooms and stuff like that. And anyway, the principal came up to my husband and I and, oh, Mr. and Mrs. Weatherburn, just want to pat you on the back. You've done a great job with your son. He's doing so well, glowing reports in the classroom. None of that behaviour anymore. You know, he's a different child. What medication have you got him on? Really? So my husband, despite his skepticness, went, come on, Marion, our daughter's calling us. We need to go and look at her pictures, you know. And so he's this Catholic principal. Yeah, what medication have you got him on? No, there was no medication. My son has never, ever, ever needed to take medication. And that behaviour was gone, right? Now, about 3 months ago, I started a job. And I met one of the girls in the job. And I just need to be mindful of what I'm saying, I guess, as to who might be listening, but I don't think there's anybody there. But anyway, it's a while ago now. And anyway, the first day of that job, I was sitting with two girls, and one was 43 and one was 21. And I said to the 43-year-old, "What's wrong with her?" And I'm not going to use her name. "What's wrong with her?" I just sensed. And this one said, "Oh, she couldn't tell me she didn't even know what was wrong." She said, "Oh, no, she's okay, But anyway, I really felt this kid's got entities with her. Excuse me. But anyway, the next day, Tuesday, I said the same thing. I said, "I'm really worried about her." "Oh, no, don't worry. It's not your business. Don't worry." Spirit always gives me an assignment and has my whole life. I'm constantly given assignments. I don't know if you've ever watched the show Touched by an Angel, but it's a little bit like Touched by an Angel. And I always end up with assignments to help people. Anyway, on the third day, on the Wednesday, I was working alone with this girl. She's 21. And I just said to her, I don't want to use her name, so sorry, I can't even think of a name to use. So I said, "Oh, are you okay?" And she goes, "Oh, Marion, it's funny, but I actually feel that I can talk to you." And we were alone. We were alone. No, there was nobody around. And she goes, "I feel I can talk to you." I said, "Yeah, you can." I never told her I was psychic. I never told her anything. It's not my place to. It's a normal work environment. I respect that. I keep them very separate. And she goes, "I've had a lot of time off with depression. I've had anxiety. I've had panic attacks. I've had nightmares. I have sleep paralysis." And I said, "Oh, tell me about that. What does that mean, And she says, "Well, I'm awake. My eyes are open, but I'm frozen to the bed and I can't do anything about it. And I see these beings and it's like they're operating inside my head. They do stuff inside my head and they put thoughts in there and they put horrible, destructive images in there." And it was frightening what she was saying because she was experiencing all of this awake as a 21-year-old. Anyway, so I said, "Oh, that sounds really terrible." And she had a bit of a cry and I didn't talk to her about anything more that day. The next day, we spent a couple of hours together alone again at the end of the day. Everyone had gone home and there was just her and I from 3 o'clock onwards. So we talked, all day. She goes, "Oh, Marion, can I talk to you again? I feel I can really talk to you." And I said, Yeah. And I said, "How often do you have these sleep paralysis, these nightmares and these visions and these things happening to you?" She says, "Pretty much every night, and I have had since I was 17. So for 4 years, this poor girl had been tormented, right? How this girl had never turned to drugs, I have no idea. That's her sheer willpower." She goes, "Marion, I've been to counsellors. I've told counsellors everything." No, she said, "No, I've told them as much as I can tell them, but I can't tell them that I can see these beings, messing with my head at night. I can't tell them that." So she said, "They won't understand me." She said, "I don't know what to do." She said, and then she looked at me and she said, and she had crystals on her desk, and she looked at me and she said, "You don't know any psychics, do you? My mum seems to think I need to see a psychic." Here I am again. My assignment is you. And I went, yeah. And I happened to have my book in my bag. And I said, "Will you please take this home tonight and read my chapter about my son, James?" I said, "This is what I feel. You've got entities with you." And I told her briefly about my son's story and she broke down. By now we were sitting in my car. So, work was finished. It was 5 o'clock. We sat in my car till 7 o'clock that night and she just went to pieces. And she said, "Oh my God, you believe me. You understand me." She said, "You know how hard it is for me to carry this around how do I can't tell people what's going on for me. Nobody will understand." She was a 6. She was a pure 6. And the most beautiful soul. So anyway, I said, "Oh my God, all right, leave it with me. I'm going to do some work on this tonight." And she goes, "Okay, what are you going to do?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to talk to my Alpara and my team, and we're going to stop this." So that was on the Thursday night. The next afternoon, we worked together, but there was another person around, so we didn't really get to do anything, but I kind of gave her a wink and I gave her a hug and gave her a squeeze, and she knew I was on her side. She knew I understood, and she actually followed me outside at lunchtime and she said, Marion, I feel so relieved. She said, last night was the first night I didn't have the nightmares and I didn't have the sleep paralysis. She said, I'm just so relieved. She said, did you talk to them last night to go away? Did you take them away? I said, well, you tell me. I said, I've got to put as much trust in something I can't really see, not really, that's tangible, to try and help you. But if you're telling me that you slept like a baby, then that's fantastic. Anyway, the following week, about the Thursday, I was walking down the hallway in the office and she pulled me into an office and shut the door. And she said, Marion, how do I thank you? She looked 10 years younger. And she was only 21 to start with. She looked 10 years younger. And she said, Marion, I haven't had a single nightmare. I haven't had paralysis. I've been sleeping all night. I feel happy. I said, you look so different. And she did. She was at peace. And to this day, so that was 9 weeks ago, maybe 10 weeks ago, to this day, she still has had no more entity interference just because of the clearing. So if you're experiencing things, and now I know when I was in Capalaba and I did a reading for a lady there, a lady came, she came into the shop looking urgently for a psychic reading because she had experienced very much the same thing the night before, and she was petrified, absolutely shitting herself scared, and she'd experienced all these things, and so she'd come in looking for a psychic, and it just so happens that I actually had an available spot that day, later on that day in about 3 hours time. So she came back, and again I had to do this clearing for her, and it is real. Now I don't want to alarm you, and I don't want to scare you. The incidence of this occurring to you or anyone you know is as common as you having a home invasion. So in real life, it doesn't happen that often. But what I want to do is tell you that there's more to these kids than needing to put them on Ritalin or ADD or ADHD. Don't. If you feel that some of these symptoms that I was telling you, the two different groups of symptoms, there's really good symptoms, and then there's those really shitty, destructive, scary symptoms. If that's that, a counsellor will not be able to do a thing about this at all, right? Now, if you've got kids in your classroom, and I've got two girlfriends that are teachers, and I've dealt with teachers who have these, they go, wow, that makes sense, and I can say to them, and I've said to them, you've got this, there's a little boy in your classroom, and this is what he looks like, and this is what he looks like, and he sits in that chair there. I've done that. This is what I've done in readings. And they go, yeah, I know exactly who you're talking about. She said, wow, wow, I thought this was my psychic reading, but you're telling me about this kid who's absolutely, I'm pulling my hair out to help this kid, and you've just made it all make sense. Now, counsellors can't help these kids because counselling is of the mind. This stuff is in the soul. These entities mess with the mind, but it's on a spiritual level. Psychologists don't work with that level, at all. Psychics work with that level. And it's the same as, you take your car engine to a mechanic. You take your mind to a psychologist. Same thing. You take your auto electrical system in your car to an auto electrician to get fixed. You take your soul to a psychic to get fixed. It's a fact. As more and more people wake up these days, they're going to be sixes like little Johnnies. Okay, so what I want to say to you is, there's another story in my book too, for those that have read my book. So there's a story about James, and there's also a story about Riley, who was a 17-year-old teenager, absolutely hooked on drugs. And this is what these kids do. And I did a reading last night for a beautiful lady who's a grandma of a very lost 17-year-old she came to me as a last resort. Well, I'm prepared to try anything to try and help my child, as I'm sure you guys can appreciate. And this loving grandma, she's been sending him texts, I love you, and are you okay, and everything like that. And she's going, what do I do to help what do I do to save my grandchild? what do I do? You know, and I went, oh my God, he's got one, you know, and this was a normal, this grandma is probably a 5, bless her heart. If she's watching tonight, you know, thank you so much for being you, because you've probably just saved your grandson, how do you thank someone for doing that? I've got my son back today because of Jacqueline. You know, my son wouldn't be alive today. He would have grown up on Ritalin and on drugs. He'd be dead by now if those entities had got hold. How many people do we know that have suicided? Kids or teenagers. I'm so passionate about this stuff. I wish I could get into schools and help teachers to just be aware that all you need to do is be aware. They don't need to teach them differently. They don't need to do more courses to learn how to parent, you know, teach these kids. They just need to be aware that this exists, whether it's your children that are 6s or the children that have got entities. It's just an awareness thing. You know, if you're struggling with your child and you believe they might, you know, that you're concerned about the behaviour, just drop me a line, send me their photo. I'll soon tell you. You know, I you know, it's something that I do. You know, and if they've got an entity, okay, well, I'll work with that. That's fine. You know, it's only one session. But if they're these children that have got these other traits, and you want to find out whether your child's psychic or whether your child has got a sixth sense, then I will put a link on my Facebook page for you afterwards. And it will have brightly coloured hands, and it's called Children as Our Special Teachers, and it's an article that I wrote, and that's what my next book's about. It's an article that I wrote all about children and what you can do to help those children develop those 6 senses, okay? Because it's not a sense that we automatically know how to use, right? So but once these children can touch that 6th sense, oh my God, you know, when you watch I do psychic testing on kids all the time, but and I do it with children, with parents present. I never do it with, I don't work with children on their own. I always work with parents, because usually it's the parents that have come to me first about the behaviour, all right? And then I work with the children and I do the psychic testing, and the parents think, oh my God, my child's psychic. And I go, yeah, but he's not going to work like a psychic. What happens then is they get put in touch with their guides, they get put in touch with themselves. They then know when they have to make decisions as they're getting older about fast cars, fast drugs, fast sex, fast theft, fast bad attitude, fast, you know. All you've got to say to them is you give them these words, you give them these prompts, and that puts them back in touch with their soul, so that they know the difference, that they go, oh yeah, right? So as parents, years ago, say my parents worked on my mind, or, you know, we teach kids the ABCs, 1, 2, 3s, how to, you know, all the practical things. Nah, not anymore, not anymore. Now we've got to teach their kids about being an empath, like little Johnny. We've got to teach the kids about protection, put them in white light. Okay, so these children need to learn how to put themselves into like an egg, and like their feet come off the ground, and you put an egg around them and you fill them with white light, and then you check them daily for cracks. So there are no cracks, you know, no cracks in their aura. They learn how to do it. Mark my words, in years to come, there will be children in the playground channeling your parents or grandparents. Oh, hey, you know, Stephen, you know, stop doing that. Grandma doesn't like it. Grandma says you're a naughty boy. Right? Trust me, all these kids that are growing up as 6s, these 9 out of 10 kids, they're going to start channeling as normal, and they already are. I can tell you so many stories. I could talk 24/7, and as you can tell, I'm really passionate about it and have got so much proof around me that I wish I could just give to you. I wish I could. What does Tracy say? Tracy tells me to upload it onto a USB. So if I could upload it onto a USB and put it on the computer, and then you could just watch it like a video, you'd go, oh my God, this stuff is amazing. And it is. You know, this is the stuff I've got to live with every day, is knowing this. Now, the other thing about these entities, right? So the one last night, I did a reading last night, and so on her grandson, he had an entity. Excuse me. Oh, isn't that? Look at my eyes. Oh my God. But anyway, drink. So what ended up happening is it's almost like I sit down and have a chat to this kid that was mucking around with her grandson's head. Now I'm kind of hoping that the grandson will now make contact with the family, and please, if you're watching, I know that you'll call me. So I end up counselling the spirit, or the passed over, the kid. He's just a kid, but he's dead. So I end up counselling him. So my work is not just about counselling you through psychic readings. My work is also about counselling these guys in spirit as well. Now, I probably sound like a loony right now, but please reassure me that I'm not, because I'm not. I know this is real. So, there is help there. If you're struggling with your kids, I've seen way too many parents come to me for psychic readings who are really struggling with their kids. These kids just want to love, and there's a lot of kids now that are coming back with Asperger's, and they're on the spectrum, and also autism, and all sorts of different behavioural issues, and that on a spiritual level, what that's doing is the universe is using them to bring love back into your family, for you to put get off the phone, put the phone down, and be a parent to that child. Now, one thing I don't want you to do at home is, if you're in a bit of a volatile relationship, or you're going through separation, you're going through divorce, or you're even before that, starting to fight and argue, please don't hide that from your kids. It's the worst thing you can do. What the kids want to see is you have a discussion, or you have a fight, whatever, as long as it's not a horrible fight, obviously. Let them see you resolve it. Because if you pretend that everything's okay, those kids aren't listening to your words. They are sixes, they are empaths, they get it, right? So they can feel your energy in the house, and they will start playing up. If your kids are playing up, first place to look, before you even look at entities or anything, or whether they're a little Johnny, look at what's going on in the house. If you've got tension in your house and you're trying to hide it from your kids, those kids will play up. So do them a favour and just show them, teach them how to do conflict resolution. Don't be so quick to dismiss a child. You're sharing your house with souls that have been here either many times before, or this might be their first incarnation, or it might be their 100th incarnation, where it's actually only your 5th incarnation. All right, we're all here from the spiritual classroom at different levels and different spiritual levels, like I was talking about before, the 78%, the 44%. When I do readings for people, and especially email readings, or if I do face-to-face readings, I always, that's the difference. I don't do it with phone readings, but I can tell where you're at on your percentage, and I can tell what your lessons are in life as well, and where you're clashing and stuff like that. And it's just so valuable if you work on these lessons in your life. This is the life that counts. Don't get hooked up in the crap and the day-to-day stress of stuff. All right, because there's a much bigger picture. There's a whole lot more going on out there, that once you start to trust it, once you start to see that there is more to life, the more it's almost addictive. You'll start looking for it every day. How many of you have put out to the universe to either hear from somebody and then they ring, oh, surprise, or there's a car park. I want a car park there. I need a car park there. And then you get there and the car park's waiting for you. How many of you have done that? Okay, how do you think that works? That's the power of thought. That's how powerful this stuff is, right? A pendulum, you can use a pendulum for readings. I can't use a pendulum anymore, and I have shown this before, but I can't use a pendulum anymore, because no matter how still I use it, I can control the pendulum. I can tell it to go round clockwise or anti-clockwise or up and down or side to side, and I do not move it. And you can watch. I've had people watch it. I've had people test me. It's the power of thought. It is extremely powerful. And this is what I said to the lady last night. Like, she's going, oh, my grandson on drugs, or my grandson this and my grandson. Yes, okay, and that's fine. That's called love. We're allowed to love our kids. But please, if your child has gone missing, your child has gone through drugs, I know there are women, I know there are families watching tonight who are struggling with kids on drugs at the moment, or suicide, or on suicide watch. I know it because I talk to you. You know, you talk to me and I talk to you. But please, imagine those children, the power of thought, the power of ordering a car park, you know, the power of getting somebody to ring you, you know, or whatever. Imagine those kids as not being on drugs. Picture them as not being on drugs. Picture them as coming home. Picture them as safe. When they do come home again, if you've got, now I'm talking about teenagers who have been destructive and destroying houses and bashing doors and, you know, riding off cars and themselves and stuff like that. When they do come home, don't give them a lecture. Don't, as much as you'd like to lecture them, they are already feeling bad enough. If your child is a 6 and they've grown up through the years as a 6, but they've been in this household over here. Remember what I said about little Johnny over here with his mum over here who was a 5? Remember that? That little Johnny will end up on drugs by the time he's 13, 14, 15 because of the visions and the messages and the things that he hears with his inner ears and sees with his inner eyes and feels with his inner heart. Okay, so they end up taking drugs. I never took drugs because I was too scared to take drugs, and even now I still don't because I wouldn't, because I'm too scared to lose my gift, to be honest. So I won't, you know, I just won't do it. But these kids do, because they're in groups and they see other kids around them who, you know, they don't see anybody like them. These kids don't talk about this stuff. All right, so if your kids are struggling, sure, you know, you want to go down the counselling track, that's fine. But if you feel that it's something else or something on a spiritual level, just don't be so quick to medicate them and squash the life out of their soul. These kids are coming back to teach us how to love again. That's their job, right? Don't push them away by labelling them with something because that's what society expects you to do. Nurture them, love them, sit with them, teach them how to meditate, teach them how to be still. These kids need to use their feet. They were born without shoes on. They need to go out onto the wet grass, into the mud. They need to go to the beach. They need to walk on stones. They need to use their bare feet. They were born with bare hands. They need to go and use their hands. They need to go and make things. They need to get splinters. They need to get mud under their fingernails that they can't get out. You know, they need to go and play. They need to go and climb trees. They need to go and look in creeks. You know, they need to go and have a really good time. You know, they need to sing. They need to dance. They don't need to be told to be quiet. Turn off the bloody PlayStation and get off the phone. You know, this technology is the worst thing that's actually ever been invented for our families, and it's destroying, it's not letting the kids, you know, I almost want to call this an entity as well, you know, because it's, you know, they're not playing games about how to love people. Sorry, I lecture, don't I? Okay, so some of their behaviour that is displayed could be because of the overwhelming amount of emotion. Now, if you imagine, if that glass there, if I kept filling that glass, filling that glass, eventually it would tip over. So you imagine our little kids who, you know, that they go to school, you know, they go to school with other kids. I'm talking about grade 2s, grade 3s, grade 1s, grades 2, it doesn't matter what grade. And some of these kids are coming from families that are quite, you know, dysfunctional, and they're bringing that energy to school, and they play it out in the classroom, and they take it out on other kids in the classroom. So they actually, you know, they have all that energy. So if your kids haven't learnt to download, if they're just getting, you know, if they're just absorbing all that, you know, make out that's a glass of mud, you know, if anything, but if they're absorbing all that behaviour from people around them in the classrooms, then it's just going to be destructive, you know. So there's a lot of things that you can do. So so if you feel that your child, the behaviour, you're really concerned about the child, and you go, oh Marion, maybe could you have a look at my photo of my child, or whatever, or maybe we could do a quick reading, excuse me, even a short reading, as well, and I can have a look at it for you, and it's no biggie to clear a spirit or a bad spirit, but please be open to the fact that these things happen. I remember, I'm going to share something with you. For years, I'm 56, right? So, and for years and years and years, I've known I'm psychic all my life. But, in Adelaide, there's an institution called Glenside, and I guess every capital city has mental institutions, and they are full of psychics, right? And I know that. And that's one of the things growing up that I learnt. And you don't tell people, or you'll get locked up. So anyway, I never told anybody until this book came out, because I was too scared to get locked up. A week after this book was released, I was seeing a doctor of mine, and she was a beautiful doctor. And anyway, I'd had a lot of counselling because, as you know, I'd lost my husband, lost my mum and dad, and moved from Perth to Adelaide, and had a lot of bad stuff happen. Apart from those things, there's a whole lot more. And I was in counselling and seeing a doctor every week just to make sure that I was alive, because I thought about suicide, but it's my spiritual belief that stopped me from doing that, because I know that if I committed suicide, I'd end up in limbo. I'd end up in this level here until the term of my natural death. Right, so, but doctors in the physical world had to keep an eye on me. I've worked through all that now. That was of the mind. It's not of the soul. It's I've learned a whole lot of lessons around that. But I digress. But so anyway, I walked into the doctor this day, and because I had a copy of my book for her, and I'd written a message inside the book for her. And I said, she goes, oh, Marion, you're looking really well. It was a week after my launch. I had a big launch at Whalers Restaurant at Victor Harbour, and lots of people came, and it was wonderful. And anyway, she goes, oh, you're looking really well. How come you're looking so well? Are you feeling much better? Is the counselling working? Is the, And I said, well, I took a risk. And I said, no, Dr. Kate. I said, I've launched my book. She goes, what? You've written a book? What's the book about? And I told her, and I told her about, she goes, oh, what's it about? She goes, oh, who's this James? What's James about? And I said, that's the story about my son. Would you like to hear it? And I told her what I just told you, and she backed me up. And you know what? She stood up, and I thought, shit, here we go. She's going to put me in a straitjacket. She stood up, and she opened the door, and she goes, Marion, you can leave now. Please go to your future. You've got a gift. All right? She didn't send me to an institution. I know what I'm talking about. This stuff is real. What I'm trying to do with this video tonight is tell you that there are other sides to being psychic. And spirituality. It's not just all about loved ones that come through, and if they want to come through, that's fantastic, but that's quite rare. It's unless somebody can physically give you a name and a description, but all they're giving you is vagaries of colours of hair, which is always grey, funnily enough. I don't know. This stuff is real, and I want it to be real for you, and that's why I wrote this book, and I'm writing my next books, and that's why I've got my videos on YouTube, is because I want, under Marion Weatherburn, because I want to teach you how to do this for yourself. I want to teach you how to connect with spirit so that you can feel the love and you can feel the guidance, because it's beautiful. I can't imagine being a 5. I've never been a 5. I can't imagine living life without my team. I can't imagine not having that depth, of being able to help you guys or these children. All right, so the point of my my lecture tonight, for lack of a better word, and please forgive me if I've been a bit strong. These kids who are 6s, they love animals. Get them a pet. They just love pets. They love dogs. They love cats. They love birds. They just love, because you know why? Because dogs and cats and birds are simple. They're souls, you know. Maybe they were people in last lifetimes. They have simple souls, and that's what these kids need. That's all these kids are. They don't like this complicated world. They're here to put the world back into shape, on a love level, starting with your family, one family at a time. They know their role. They're born with smiles on their faces. All right, so just be aware that there is more to life. Fives, sixes, okay, all right, and let your child bring the love into your life. You know, if you struggle with the behaviour of your child, get their photo albums out from when they were little babies. You know, we all saw how Prince Harry was looking at little Archie, you know, with his baby. Recapture that feeling of your shitty 7-year-old or your shitty 10-year-old, you know. They are the same child. Recapture that love in your heart and parent from there. Don't parent from reaction. Reacting. You'll push your child away. And this is why a lot of families are breaking down. So my job, if I've helped one family tonight, fantastic. I'm going to call it a night. Feel free to send me comments, and I'm not going to read any messages tonight during the session. I'm not reading any during the session. I am going to make myself a cuppa and I'm going to sit down and read the sessions because it's been a long session, and I hope you've got something out of it. If you think I'm a loony, tell me. If you think you need help, tell me. Souls are simple. We just want to love and be loved. You know, I'm here to help you. This is the life that counts. My name's Marion Weatherburn. Have a great week.